Welcome to the Secular Scriptures. I'm Gail, and today's reading and discussion come from Genesis chapter 20 and 21 in the World English Bible, a free public domain translation of the Bible. If you are only here for the tale and don't want to sojourn with me for the length of the discussion, by all means, journey on to the next video. But if it pleases you, settle in for some history, literary analysis, comparative mythology, and conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. This is a secular Bible study. Ooh, channeling Viced Rhino there. This is a secular Bible study. Therefore, maintain the innocence of your hands and do not proselytize nor sully the text with apologetic excuses. I am not a biblical scholar. I just love these stories. Peaceful words in the comments are welcome. I will not hear of fighting. Bring your jug of water and a little bread, and now I will do as I promised and read this story. Genesis chapter 20. Abraham traveled from there towards the land of the south and lived between Kadesh and Shur. He lived as a foreigner in Gerar. Abraham said about Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man, because the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not come near her. He said, "Lord, will you kill even a righteous nation? Didn't he say to me, 'She is my sister'? Even she herself said, 'He is my brother.' I have done this in integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands." God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that in the integrity of your heart you have done this, and I also withheld you from sinning against me. Therefore I didn't allow you to touch her. Now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. If you don't restore her, know for sure that you will die, you and all who are yours." Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ear. The men were very scared. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? How have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? You have done deeds to me that ought not be done." Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you have done this thing?" Abraham said, "Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place. They will kill me for my wife's sake. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. When God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is your kindness which you shall show me. Everywhere that we go, say of me, he is my brother.' Abimelech took sheep and cattle, and male servants and female servants, and gave them to Abraham, and restored Sarah his wife to him. Abimelech said, 'Behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you.' To Sarah he said, 'Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, it is for you a covering of the eyes to all that are with you. In front of all you are vindicated.' Abraham prayed to God, so God healed Abimelech his wife and his female servants, and they bore children. For Yahweh had closed up tight all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife." Chapter 21. Yahweh visited Sarah as he had said, and Yahweh did to Sarah as he had spoken. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called his son, who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Isaac means he laughs. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, "God has made me laugh. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." She said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age." The child grew and was weaned. Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. Therefore she said to Abraham, "Cast out this servant and her son, for the son of this servant will not be heir with my son Isaac." The thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight on account of his son. God said to Abraham, "Don't let it be grievous in your sight because of the boy, and because of your servant. In all that Sarah says to you, listen to her voice, for your offspring will be named through Isaac. I will also make a nation of the son of the servant, because he is your child." Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a container of water, and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and gave her the child, and sent her away. She departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. The water in the container was spent, and she put the child under one of the shrubs. She went and sat down opposite him, a good way off, about a bow shot away. For she said, "Don't let me see the death of the child." She sat opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept. God heard the voice of the boy. The angel of God called to Hagar out of the sky and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Don't be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Get up, lift up the boy, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went, filled the container with water, and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew. He lived in the wilderness, and as he grew up, he became an archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran. His mother got a wife for him out of the land of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the captain of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, "God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son. But according to the kindness that I have done to you, you shall do to me, and to the land in which you have lived as a foreigner." Abraham said, "I will swear." Abraham complained to Abimelech because of a water well which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. Abimelech said, "I don't know who has done this thing. You didn't tell me, and I didn't hear of it until today." Abraham took sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech. Those two made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. Abimelech said to Abraham, "What do these 7 ewe lambs which you have set by themselves mean?" He said, "You shall take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, that it may be a witness to me that I have dug this well." Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because they both swore an oath there. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Abimelech rose up with Phicol, the captain of his army, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of Yahweh, the everlasting God. Abraham lived as a foreigner in the land of the Philistines many days. Well then. Mazel tov, I guess? Oh boy. So y'all, sometimes families are really complicated, and this one puts the complex in complicated, as in, God, you're giving everybody a complex. I mean, I guess the ladies got what they wanted, right? Okay, before I develop a complex, I have 2 channel recommendations for you. We have No Nonsense Spirituality with Britt Hartley, reasoned, informative, thoughtful, philosophical discussions with just the right amount of humor. Also, FPC Spirit Lake for some wonderful conversations about the biblical text. These guys are delightfully pragmatic, and from our vocabulary word last time, you will get hermeneutics here, not apologetics. History of the text. All right, chapter 20 was written before the fall of the Northern Kingdom by the E-source in the 9th or 8th century BCE. So the Northern Kingdom fell in 722 BCE. We know it was written before then. The E-source is disputed. Chapter 21 was written by the J and the E-source, again, E-source being disputed, in the 10th to 9th century, or the 7th to 6th century during the Babylonian exile, and then the E-source again in the 9th to 8th century before 722 BCE. And everything was put together by the redactors. We do know that J handles the treaty in chapter 21, and E is the source for the Hagar and Ishmael story. My family is making all sorts of noise, and I'm just going to ignore it. You can ignore it too. They live here. It's fine. All right. Literary analysis. We have characters to start with. In chapter 20, Abraham is in a speaking role. Sarah is present but says nothing. King Abimelech of Gerar is in a speaking role. God is in a speaking role. And then you have Abimelech's servants, male and female slaves, Abimelech's wife, and sheep and oxen. In chapter 21, God/Lord, it bounces between the two, is in a speaking role. Sarah speaks, Abraham speaks, Isaac is born. Ta-da! Ishmael is present, Hagar speaks. Then we have a mention of Ishmael's Egyptian wife. King Abimelech speaks. Phicol, the commander, just sort of stands there looking tough, I guess. There are Abimelech's servants, sheep and oxen, and specifically 7 ewe lambs. It is set when Abraham is 100 to 130-ish, somewhere in there, and Sarah is 90 to 120-ish. It's not really clear when the later parts of the story happen. It takes place in 3 different locations: the Negeb between Kadesh and Shur, the wilderness of Beersheba, and the well of Beersheba. Both chapters are told in the third person limited, which tells what characters do and say, but not what they think or feel, though we can gather that from the expressive dialogue. Arguably, this could be in the third person omniscient, as the narrator does know how both Abraham and Hagar are feeling in like 2 verses, maybe, depending on your translation. Both chapters are told in the prose narrative style, with simple locations, characters, and actions employing a simple dialogue. A dialogue is an exchange of words between 2 or more characters. Example, he said, blah, blah, blah. She said, blah, blah, blah. The format is similar to what we've seen in earlier parts of the Abrahamic story. Plot summary. Our story opens with Abraham picking up camp and trotting off to the southwest, pulling another "she's my sister" bamboozle. God inflicts one heck of a nightmare on the poor king and helps him set things right. Abraham makes out like a bandit again after admitting to marrying his haughty half-sister. Sarah gets knocked up by God. Abraham, sure, whatever you say, redactor. And everybody laughs after Isaac is born. Sarah doesn't like Ishmael laughing at or with the bouncing baby boy, so she boots him and his mother Hagar out into the desert, where there's a lot of crying instead. But God keeps his promise to Team Hagar, and they live happily ever after. Yay! Back to Abraham. There's a bit of a tiff over a well and a peace treaty and 7 little lambs for a nice little namesake. Friends, I think we may actually have a happy ending for some of the characters here. Let's just take a moment to appreciate this. Literary devices. Both chapter 20 and 21 employ narrative parallels or doublets. A doublet is an alternative version of a similar incident found elsewhere in the story. Chapter 20 is a doublet for chapter 12, and both parts of 21 will parallel later storylines. The main theme in 20 and 12 is Abraham's lack of faith in God's ability to protect him against foreign kings wanting to marry his super hot sister wife. A note here: in the Midrash, Sarah was considered to be the most beautiful woman in the world after Eve, and she never loses her beauty to age, travel, or stress. The artworks that show her as old are basically lying to you. She may have been 90, but she looked like a fresh-faced 20-something. Our next literary device is juxtaposition. These are 2 things placed close together for a contrasting effect. King Abimelech is juxtaposed to Abraham in his honesty and fairness, where Abraham lies out of fear for people he doesn't know. Wordplay is a clever, witty, or humorous use of words, creating a play on the meaning or sound, puns, double entendres, etc. Isaac's name means he laughs, referencing Sarah's laughter when God says she'll have a child after a lifetime of barrenness and menopause, and after her joy in Isaac's birth. Personally, I also think that God is laughing and telling Abraham that Isaac is his, but we'll get to that later. Anthropomorphism is the attribution of human characteristics or behavior to a god, animal, or object, in this case, a god. In chapter 21, verses 1 through 2, and verses 17 through 21, we have God directly interacting with Abraham's wives and children. He visits Sarah, and he is with Ishmael, implying a direct physical presence for both people. Comparative mythology. Normally in the comparative mythology section, I put a similar storyline from another time or place. But this round, I think that both women deserve their spotlight to be a little bit brighter, and the rest of their stories to be told. And I know I said I would do something different the last time, but I changed my mind, and it's my channel, so I can do what I want. All right. So we're going to start out with Hagar, and then we'll go to Sarah. So in the Islamic stories about Hagar, while she is not named there, they tell how the mother of Ishmael was Ibrahim's proper second wife, and how Allah, that is just God in Arabic, don't anybody freak out, told Ibrahim to send Ishmael and his mother into the wilderness in the barren valley of Mecca. The boy is the much younger version that we see in chapter 21, as he is most often depicted in Christian art as well. The child and mother nearly die from dehydration, but Hagar runs back and forth across the desert between the hills of Safa and Marwa 7 times looking for water. The angel Gabriel comes to her aid, striking the ground with his heel, creating a spring of water now called the Zamzam well. Ibrahim later returns and builds the Kaaba with Ishmael. Hagar's resilience, faith, patience, and determination to survive are commemorated by the ritual of Sa'i, I hope I said that right, where pilgrims walk between the hills 7 times. Today there is a covered walkway, and you can go online and see videos of it. It's actually kind of a cool structure. It is important to look at Sarah's character from the Jewish perspective via the Midrash, because she is so highly revered within Judaism. And unfortunately, like most feminine characters, the English biblical text does not give us much on her. What little it does give makes her sound like a disagreeable, domineering, awful person with a bad case of pretty privilege. And I think that her character deserves a fair shake here. As I mentioned before, Sarah was considered the second most beautiful woman to have ever lived after Eve. She is also somehow of royal blood. Isaac is royal through her, not through Abraham, so I assume that this is coming through her maternal line. And the forced marriages with the 2 kings reflect that. As they were entering Egypt, Abram tried to smuggle her in past the tax man in a chest. Play a little guessing game about what is in the big box, and each time he says he will pay the tax, first on vessels, then on silk, and then on pearls. Eventually, they demand that the chest be opened, and Abram loses control of the situation rather quickly. Sarai is taken to Pharaoh, and both pray to God for protection, and God grants it. Pharaoh never touched Sarai because an angel protected her, whipping his hands every time he reached out. She tells Pharaoh that she is married to another man, and he still persists, illustrating his wickedness, which puts him firmly in the wrong in the story. Bad Pharaoh, no cookie. Sarah is a prophet of God, and both God and Abraham recognize her as the head of the household, with God telling Abraham to listen to Sarah. The interpersonal issues between Sarah and Hagar are smoothed out in these stories, with Hagar being firmly placed in the wrong, and Sarah performing her duties according to her station. And I mean, Sarah, I hate to tell you this, honey, but slavery is still evil, and so is casting somebody out into the desert to die. So you're not wiggling off of this hook, baby. There is a passage about being careful how one words a prayer to God, a miracle of breast milk that I find hilarious, and an instantaneous toddler facelift for increasing the paternal family resemblance. It's a wild story. It's awesome. You should go read it. There's a lot more, but I hope that this helps to fill in some of the missing pieces of her story. And I strongly encourage you to look up the Jewish expansion packs on these characters. It's definitely worth your time. Very briefly, in the spirit of comparative mythology, I will mention the story of Helen of Troy from Homer's Iliad. As a parallel for Sarah's beauty, the desire of kings to possess it, and the problematic promises of gods that take a long time to fulfill, and the ensuing chaos that all of that causes. Conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. You know I do love me some controversies. We have some conflicting information within the text. This one, it's not that big of a deal, but it's Ishmael's age. Is he a teenager, or is he a young boy when Sarah and Abraham cast him out? He should be 16 or 18 years old when Abraham boots him out of the camp, but this part of the story implies a child that can be picked up and carried, so between 4 and maybe 10 years old, and not someone the size of a grown man. At 12, my son is as tall as I am, and now granted, that's not a big accomplishment, but I would still struggle to carry him. We have a couple possibilities here. The first and most logical is that these stories were compiled from different traditions. It was more important for the redactors to preserve the stories than to harmonize them. We've seen this before in the flood myth, and we'll see it again, especially in Joseph's story when he's sold to Egypt. If one tradition said that Ishmael was circumcised at 13, and a few years later it says that he was a young lad or child whose mother could carry him, and the math doesn't quite add up, so what? That wasn't their goal. The next would fit within the world-building context of the story, which is that people lived a really long time. It stands to reason that when characters are living for hundreds of years, their infancy and adolescence would also be extended. So while Ishmael may have been 16 to 18 years old when he was cast out into the wilderness by uber grumpy and not so old after all Sarah, making the toddler giggle or bullying him, pick your translation, he may have had the body of a 6 or 7-year-old boy. This seems to be the interpretation that is carried through in art and literature, and the one that carries over into the Islamic tradition, even if it's not explicitly stated. On a side note, many of these characters will say that they are old and then do things that someone in the prime of their life can do. And this may be cultural, or they may be joking, like when I say I'm old, like some days I feel like I'm old, but I'm not actually old unless you're a kid, and then I'm positively ancient. Next, we have conflicting information within the religion or society. So, banishing Hagar and Ishmael. What the heck? What is going on here? Okay, so we covered this from the Islamic perspective, and that is a much kinder, more reasonable storyline than Sarah jealous, Sarah banished slaves. Unfortunately, the Bible basically leaves us with Sarah banishing her slaves, one of whom is her husband's son, and the other his wife of almost 20 years at this point, to die in the desert. Like, this is just problematic on so many levels, right? So, yes, God saves them, but... So, obviously, if we take the translations where Ishmael is bullying Isaac, there needs to be a behavior correction. But, geez Louise, talk about an overreaction. Maybe this is why she's God's favorite? I don't know. So, no sticker for Sarah on the good girl chart today. Abraham may have gotten permission from God to do this really stupid, cruel, and thing, but he was still in the wrong here. First, if he didn't want to divorce and disown, he should have told Sarah to go stew in her tent for a little bit. And second, if he did want a divorce, he should have sent them away with money, servants, and supplies, not a water jug and some sandwiches. Like, what the heck? It literally took a miracle for them to survive. While the Mosaic Law doesn't come along until later in the timeline, when this was written, Abraham would have been violating the laws on how to treat a slave taken as a wife. We have a contradiction with science here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Obviously, biologically speaking, a 90-year-old woman cannot have babies, but people don't generally live much past 100 in real life either. And we are in fantasy miracle storyland here, and I'm actually fine with that. To be honest, in the context of the story Abraham and Sarah exist in, she really wasn't that old. But she had been infertile for an unspecified reason, and it's not like she had access to a perinatologist ultrasounds and genetic testing. We know that infertility is a theme that we'll run into throughout the Bible, so just stick it in the plot hook box and move on, right? But before we move on, I do want to mention that if you are a woman of a certain age who has gone more than a year without your menses, and your period comes back, you need to go see your GYN. This is not a divine blessing. This is a sign of cancer, and it needs to be addressed now, not later. This has been your PSA, and I am not a doctor. Controversies! Genesis 21, verse 1 and 2. Isaac needs a paternity test. Really, Yahweh? Is he really Abraham's only son? Is he even Abraham's son? Methinks the redactors doth protest too much in the next verses. Again. But there is actually good literary and mythological reasons for both the theory that Isaac is God's and the protest that makes him Abraham's. We have multiple divine conceptions throughout the Bible. Eve says she has made a man with God's help. There were the sons of God dallying with the daughters of man. Lemioch worries that Noah is the child of a divine being in 1st Enoch, which I know is not in the Protestant Bible, but it's still a biblical text, so we're going to go with it, right? And it's implied that Samson is the son of an angel, not Manoah. In the New Testament, associated texts relay that Mary was conceived with a kiss, making her a pure vessel for her own subsequent virgin conception and birth of Jesus. And there's like a whole bunch of others where like stuff happens, right? It's very common for God to open the womb of barren women or to heal the womb so that a woman can conceive. And it usually says when her husband is directly involved and when he's suspiciously absent. Part of Yahweh's portfolio is fertility and infertility, and I'm pretty sure that he got that bit in the divorce, but we aren't there yet in the storyline. So Philo of Alexandria, 20 BC to 50 CE, in his Mystery of Isaac, writes that Isaac was indeed a child of God in the more direct sense than in the metaphorical one. It's not exactly Zeus-level carnal knowing, but it is very clear that God did it here. So I have that quote for you. When happiness, that is Isaac, was born, she says in the pious exaltation, "The Lord hath caused me laughter, and whoever shall hear it shall rejoice with me. Open your ears, therefore, O ye initiated, and receive the most sacred mysteries. Laughter is joy, and the expression has caused is equivalent to has begotten." So that what is here said has some such meaning as this: the Lord has begotten Isaac. This is from the Allegorical Laws, chapter 3, verse 219 in the Young Translation, Yonge. It's there. We also have Paul of Tarsus, 5 to 67 CE, agrees with Philo and says in Galatians 4:22, "It is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and the other by a free woman. One, the child of the slave, was born according to the flesh. The other, the child of the free woman, was born through the promise." This means that Isaac was born by God's will alone, not by the physical act of intercourse. From the Christian point of view, Isaac's story is the precursor to Jesus' story, and from the Jewish perspective, someone was making very suspicious photocopies. Once Christianity got rolling, the storyline for Isaac was dropped in the Jewish tradition in favor of the idea that God healed Sarah and everyone around her. Questions! Did you enjoy hearing the Jewish and Islamic story expansions? If you did, let me know in the comments below, and I will do that more often. God speaks and interacts directly with both women in the story. Open-ended reactions welcome. I just want to hear what you think about that. What was your WTF moment in these 2 chapters? What did you like about this part of the story? Thank you so much for joining me on the Secular Scriptures. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, etc. I'm not sure when the next one will be out, but the next episode of Bible reading will be Genesis chapters 22 and 23, which I am temporarily dubbing, what the fuck, Abraham.
Sam, was Ella mean to you? She growled at you, huh? You were just making friends with Lollipop, too. Uh-oh, we got a trifecta going on. Lollipop says, don't be mean to Sam, Ella.